The failure of Khamenei's look to the East strategy. In recent weeks, Iran's regime has faced a backlash over the implicit and explicit support of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The people of Iran have been explicit in declaring their opposition to the unjustified war that has caused numerous civilian casualties and much damage to the Ukrainian nation. Even the regime's own analysts and officials have expressed alarm over the regime aligning itself with Putin and effectively becoming a satellite state of Russia. After years of disregarding the interests of the people and the country, the regime is now faced with a dilemma that has been years in the making and is rooted in Ali Khamenei's look to the East strategy. On February 18, 2018, Khamenei said, "In foreign policy, our priority is East over West, neighbors over distant countries, nations and countries that have more in common with us over others."
ارتباط علمی با کشورهایی که در مسیر رشد جهشی قرار دارن، کشورهای آسیا عمدتاً برن طرف نگاه باید طرف شرق باشه، نگاه طرف غرب و اروپا و اینها برای ما جز معطل کردن، جز دردسر، جز منت کشیدن و کوچک شدن هیچ اثری نداره. باید نگاه اون طرف شرق باشه. کشورهایی هستن میتونن به ما کمک کنن، میتونیم با چهره برابر با اونها مواجه بشیم، ما به اونها کمک کنیم، اونها هم به ما کمک کنن، تبادل علمی با اونها داشته باشیم.
Earlier in 2016, in a meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, Khamenei said, "Our government and nation are looking to expand relations with independent and reliable countries like China." The shift toward becoming aligned with Eastern powers such as Russia and China came as the regime faced increasing pressure over its terrorist activities, funding of terrorist groups, development of ballistic missiles, and the nuclear weapons program. While none of these programs are in line with the interests of the Iranian people, they are vital to the regime's survival and its dreams of dominating the Middle East region. Therefore, it relied on the support of China and Russia to keep it afloat as its tensions with the international community escalated. Meanwhile, Khamenei consistently stressed that the look to the East strategy was not in conflict with the regime's original neither West nor East slogan, which dated back to the Cold War era and pertained that Iran's regime would maintain its independence and not bow to the whims of foreign powers. The past few years have made it clear that contrary to the claims made by Khamenei and other officials, in the process of turning toward the East, the regime has sold Iran's economic and political independence to countries that neither have the interest in the Iranian people nor count Iran's regime as their equal. Today, the regime is selling the country's oil at low prices to China in exchange for imported goods that have caused severe damage to domestic production. Meanwhile, the regime is in the midst of signing a 25-year agreement that will give China an even bigger share of Iran's economy. At the same time, the regime is negotiating another strategic agreement with Russia, which has been mocked as the Second Turkmenchai Treaty, in which the Qajar monarchy turned large swaths of Iranian territory over to the Russian Empire in the 19th century. And as the war in Ukraine is causing major shifts in the global geopolitical landscape, it became even more evident that the regime has lost control and autonomy on its own politics. In his remarks on Russia's war of occupation against Ukraine on March 1st, Khamenei did not once mention Russia as the aggressor, but made ample references to the US and NATO as the main culprits.
ریشه بحران در اوکراین سیاست‌های آمریکاست، سیاست‌های غربی هست. اینها ریشه بحرانه.
Meanwhile, as much as Tehran has been faithful to Moscow, the latter did not return the favor. As Russia faces a new slate of sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine, it has resorted to a new power play in the ongoing talks in Vienna over Iran's nuclear program, predicating any agreement on its being able to continue doing business with Iran's regime. Moscow wants to make sure that Iran's markets give it some breathing space as it becomes more isolated. And again, Iran's regime, which has put its full faith in Russia and China's support in the nuclear talks, has refrained from making official objections. As Khamenei has locked his gaze to the East, his regime has become locked in politics and interests of Eastern power hubs. Of course, had the regime relied on the Iranian people, it would not have found itself in this situation. Iran has everything it needs to be a thriving, self-sufficient economy. It does not need nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, or terrorist groups to maintain its hold on power. It does not need to spend billions of dollars on security forces and surveillance technology while its people are struggling to make ends meet. But when your people become your main enemy, then you inevitably need to find support from elsewhere. In a meeting with Iranian scientists in November 2018, in which he further explained his look to the East strategy, Khamenei mocked the monarchic dictatorships that preceded the mullahs' rule as incompetent rulers that did not care for the interest of the people but bent backwards for foreign powers. Today, as Khamenei's regime bends backwards to serve the economic and political interests of Russia and China, it has become undeniable that the mullahs are no different from their predecessors. Rulers who don't serve their people end up becoming the puppets of foreign powers.